Yeah, and thank you, Caesar, for not butchering my name, although it happens all the time. I'm Michael Hakkarainen. All you have to do is pronounce each letter, right? And there's only 10 of them. So not too bad. And you guys can see my screen as well, correct? Thank you. Yeah, so I'm the PCBL specialist. If there's one thing that we're really good at as educators, it's creating acronyms. And here at USBE, we suffer from TMA, which is too many acronyms, and PCBL here stands for Personalized Competency-Based Learning. I work with the digital teaching and learning team in the teaching and learning department. I got to change that. Actually, our team has kind of split up a little bit, and I'm actually in a team now called Quality Instruction Team. So excited about that. Just to give you a little background on Utah and what we do here with our Utah State Board of Education, our mission is on creating equitable conditions for student success. So we're advocating for the necessary resources, developing policy, and providing effective oversight and support. We're a decentralized state, so we support the LEAs. We have 130 LEAs, districts and charter schools. We support them, and then they support their schools, and their schools support their students. We have about 675,247 students in our public school system here in Utah. And so to put it bluntly, our state is about the same size as Los Angeles Unified. And we have a lot of work ahead of us. It's a diverse state, both geographically and culturally. We're governed by, here at USBE, 15 elected school board members from throughout the state. And then we have a superintendent, Dr. Sydney Dixon, who runs our Board of Education. Just a little history lesson to give you some more background. We started in 2015 or 16 looking at a competency-based education program and started a grant program then. And a little bit after that, we started exploring and then creating our own portrait of a graduate. That's been out now for about 3 years, and that's really become our North Star. That's what we teach to. That is what's driving our agency. And the reason that this came about was some information from our Department of Workforce Services here in Utah. They pointed out that there were these top 5 skills that our local businesses and agencies were saying that they needed from students: critical thinking, active listening, speaking, reading comprehension, monitoring. Kind of makes me wonder if Addison, one of the students earlier, was on this sort of like committee, because she nailed it, right? When she said, like, we need more outside school experiences to learn how to communicate and interact with people. And that's what all of our businesses and state agencies are telling us. Like, you can have the most incredible nuclear physicist in the world graduate from the University of Utah, but they're never going to find a job if they can't be nice to people, right? And so we're trying to instill that in our students. And we then invited the rest of our community, our parents, politicians, from the governor's office to local school board members, legislators, educators, even students. And we said, like, what is it that you really want to see our graduates who go through K-12 system in Utah? Like, what are these aspirations? What are these characteristics that we want to see in them? You know, the new person at your dinner table or the new employee in your business. And if you look at this, you saw a brief glimpse of this at the beginning of the day. You saw the green section over there. That's sort of like our citizenship area, but that's just 5 of the 13 characteristics that we identified. And we put them into this map, which stands for mastery, autonomy, and purpose. The mastery is the blue section. This is the content that we can teach. Academic mastery is just one of the 13 things. It's ironic that when we ask parents, what do you want to see in your child when they graduate? Like, academic mastery doesn't make the top 10 list. But then when we say, how do you measure a school's success? They go straight to academic mastery, right? So you guys all know that. But we got like wellness, civic, financial, economic literacy, digital literacy. And then in the yellow section, autonomy, these are the 4 C's, right? We don't want compliance in our students. We want people who are creative and collaborative and critical thinking and problem solving and able to communicate. So this is what came out of that portrait of a graduate, the map. Okay, so that's our background, right? We've decided that we have a portrait of a graduate as a state, and we're going to teach to that. And here's where our challenge comes into play. As Contessa just said, you know, it means we have to change the way we're teaching. And it means that teachers need to change to be more of less of a teacher-centered classroom and environment, and more of a learner-centered, moving from content-centered, to I teach science, to skill-centered, which is I teach students to think like scientists. And then being able to test our knowledge is not so much a priority as having students demonstrate skills. And what a wonderful example we saw from Logan County, where students were creating portfolios. That's the direction we're moving now, moving from lessons to learning experiences, from grades to feedback. You know how that shift happens, right? And it takes a lot of time. So what we created to help our educators and our LEA leaders understand this is our PCBL framework. And I'm actually going to put the link to it in the chat. We would love for you to take a look at it, borrow from it, steal from it, whatever you want. It's all collaborative, right? And a lot of our language has come from working with learnercenter.org, but we identified these 5 essential components: culture of learning, learner agency, demonstrated competency assessment, customized supports, and social and emotional learning. And we have to be so careful with that last one, right? To make sure we say social and emotional learning. Another one of our challenges, I don't know if you have this in your communities, is that when we say SEL, people hear CRT, which is like, where did you make that leap? But there's a lot of politics going on. And this has been a very dynamic framework. It has changed over the years. This is now version 4, I believe, and we're probably going to keep changing it. I know that SEL might be rebranded as like student wellness, but it will have the same parts and elements to these components in there. I'm going to break down each one of these and talk about them briefly before we get into the Q&A area. So this, I just want you to see, is the framework. When you open it up, it's a government document, so the first 5 pages are like meaningless, but eventually you'll get to a breakdown of each one of these components. And what we've done in here, I'll take culture of learning first. On the first page is at the top, you'll see the definition, what exactly it means. And herein lies another challenge. How do we write these definitions in a way that they're not overly inundated with teacher talk and acronyms? So we're trying to make these a little bit more parent friendly as we move forward. But we have our definition up there of what exactly is culture of learning. And then on the left side, we break down evidence-based practices and strategies, both for educators, and we even put in the effect size there. And then on the right, for students. And then finally at the bottom, we have what can families do? And this is the most important part, right? We say families, but we really mean like, parents, community members, the whole learning community, to support students in this shift to a more learner-centered environment. A lot of times we'll hear some pushback, like educators or certain members of our political community will say, PCBL is unproven. There's no data to support this. And we kind of like nod for a second and say, maybe, it is new, but look at here. Look at these strategies. This is not new. And this is research-based, and it is supported by data. And especially our educators who are new to the next, go around of like, what acronym is it this year? Like, we've done STEM, we've done PBIS, we've done SEL, we've done UDL, now we're doing PCBL. And if we don't do it right, we'll be SOL. But it's like, no, you're doing it. Sorry, I didn't cuss, but I came close. Katie, you got that? Okay. I got my Utah language going. But you'll go in and see like, oh, wait, establishing a portrait of a graduate to describe the outcomes. That's what our whole agency is doing. And designing, adapting competencies. Like, yes, this is what we're already doing. We've just taken what works with teaching students today in this new landscape, and put it into a framework. So that's how it's broken down. In culture of learning, you'll see like the collective commitment. This is everything that we've learned from Hattie: high expectations, teacher clarity, and the importance of fostering meaningful relationships. And when you go out to our schools, you'll see it, but you won't necessarily see a common language. You'll see a language that's specific to that LEA, whether it's their classroom or their district, or at the state level, it's portrait of a graduate, right? But you go to Washington Fields Intermediate, and they use the charger process to describe how the educators work together for clarity. And you go to the Launch High School in Cedar City, and you'll see that they have the 3 I's. And even one of our school districts, JUEB, has come up with their own portrait of a graduate for their community. We then move into learner agency. This is about teaching our students to be self-directed learners, teaching them about goal setting, giving them choice and voice, self-assessment, ownership. All of that falls into learner agency. And what that looks like in a classroom or a school is really unique to that school. Here's an elementary school where some 5th graders have decided they're going to demonstrate their competency by creating a podcast. So these two are working together. They're in a room. They're alone, but it's glass, so you can like see it from the classroom, and they're creating their podcast. Other students, they might be creating posters or working in a group or working alone, but we give them that choice. And then they take ownership. And even in our work as grown-ups, right, when your boss tells you to do something, you kind of like do it and move on. But when they ask you to help solve a problem, like, you own it and it's part of you. We're seeing that with our students, but it's a little scary for teachers to release some of that control. Then we move into DCA, another acronym, Demonstrated Competency and Assessment. And this is where we make that big shift from grades to feedback. And we also want to take the data that we're collecting from these formative assessments and make sure that our students have access to it as well, so that they can assess where they are and have some choice in their pathway moving forward. It's all about timely and effective feedback, and then getting data from a variety of formative assessments to process and accelerate their student learning. And what this looks like when you go into a school is that these clear learning targets that might be part of that culture of learning, they'll be on the board, they'll be on the wall, and they'll be written in student-friendly terms. Like, I can read words with, actually, I can't read that. But how about I can compare, count back, and take from 10. So these are going to be posted and visible to students. And those students can then reflect on them with their own rubrics that they have, or their assessments. They'll give themselves a 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 4. It depends on which school or district you're in. And then they're allowed to move at their own pace in some situations. Like, there might be every Monday a teacher directed introduction to the lesson, but then the students have access to a variety of materials. And this child here is working independently, sitting on the floor. There's another example of choice. Find the best place to work for you. And they've got their tracking on paper and pencil, but they're using the iPad to move through a certain program. I want to be clear here and point out that demonstrated competency assessment doesn't mean students are sitting on Chromebooks all day, moving through like a math program or anything like that. There might be some elements of those digital teaching and learning tools brought in to support PCBL, but it's not reliant upon that. We've seen PCBL executed in classrooms that have barely any technology in them at all. It all depends on the learner style, the teacher style, and what's available to them. Customized supports. I'll wrap this up here pretty quickly and we'll get into some questions, but I just want to go through the last couple pieces of our framework. Customized supports is about providing access to grade level instruction. So even students who might have an IEP or are reading or working below grade level, we want to ensure that they are exposed to grade level content at all times. So we'll make sure that they have access to that grade level instruction and then provide the supports that they need. Timely supports to achieve growth and competency. We give them their personalized learning pathways, and we make sure that supports are there based on each learner's demonstrated strengths, interests, and needs. In the classroom, what that might look like varies between subject areas and grade level and teacher styles, but this is just a glimpse of like I think a 3rd grade classroom where you can see the students are put into different groups based on their progress. And then the supports are there if they need to use the iPad, if they need to watch a video, if they need to work one-on-one with a teacher or a paraeducator, or if they just need different resources. Those are made available as they go through the week. And this elementary school, specifically in Farmington, Utah, is really unique. What you're seeing over the educator's shoulder is a garage door. All of the classrooms have garage doors on 1/4 of the classroom, and they can be raised, which then allows a giant common area. So all of the 3rd graders are in their wing, or all of the 5th graders, whichever it is, can then move into the center area, either to work in groups, work with support, work independently. It's a very flexible environment. And good question, Roman. We're using Canvas. That's our LMS. It is a statewide contract. So we're really consistent across the state on which tools can be used. And we also have a statewide contract for Nearpod, which works very well inside of Canvas. So our teachers are all using the same digital resources in that area, but then they can choose whichever they like to use, other tools that they like to use. Like some school districts might use Pear Deck instead of Nearpod or whatever, but everybody does have Canvas as their LMS. The last element in our component is social and emotional learning. This is where we want to have our students that are students that are healthy and happy do better in everything. You know, once they have that self-confidence and they know that they're in a safe place, then we know that they're ready to learn. So we want to make sure that our students are able to set goals that they can achieve, that they can establish and maintain positive relationships and make responsible decisions themselves. And this looks different everywhere, every day. Just one example is a kindergarten classroom where before they ever started their lesson, they had to partner up and answer a question. The students were working together. They were just getting comfortable in their space. And then they were getting ready to learn. This was like taken back in the winter, so you might see some masks there, but we just want students to always feel safe and comfortable and know that they can ask for help when they need it. We have been able to create this environment over the last year and really expand on it because of a lot of support from Learner Centered Collaborative. I'm going to shout out like Brittany Griffin specifically has just been fantastic to work with. She embodies all of these components when she does her professional learning with us. And it has been every other week online since I want to say September or October. That's when I started with the agency. And she's also come out and done some deep dives, which is where we get together in our groups for 2 to 3 hours and work one-on-one, face-to-face, and then in small groups and with Brittany. And she's also come out to do some site visits. We call them innovation zones. And so she's gone around to a lot of the schools that I've shown you images of and taking teacher specialists and directors and even superintendents and board members from USBE to see PCBL in action and to experience it. So we've done the learner-centered professional learning. We have a grant system in place that is a 5-year grant program, gives our LEAs a year of funding for planning, 2 years for implementation, and 2 years for expansion. And that most of that money goes to providing professional learning experiences, stipends, salaries, professional development. It goes to time and capacity, not into tech tools or anything like that. We also work with the Mastery Transcript Consortium as we're looking to reevaluate how we assess students and moving away from that grade point average and number of credits to more of a portfolio. We have the innovation zone set up, and we've also been revising our agency's strategic plan. In order to shift how we're teaching, we also have to shift about how we think about teaching and at a state level. And we've added personalized teaching and learning as one of our strategic goals. And what we mean by that is we can't expect educators to create the experience of student or learner agency in their classroom until they experience it themselves. So whether it's micro credentials or giving our educators their ability to choose their own personalized pathway, we've broken this down into 4 parts: empowering the educators, parents, and students to have access to that data that they need, supporting LEAs in personalizing learning for each of their students, increasing access to qualified school personnel to design personalized learning plans in partnership with teachers, students, and families, and promoting new school system models for personalizing learning implementation. 4D, that's a big one, right? So that's our challenge. We are, making the shift to PCBL, and it's slow, but when it happens, we make great strides. And we found and heard from our LEAs that the best way to make difference, like exponentially, is through coaching. Coaching each other, ourselves, and our educators. So I know I want to leave about 9 minutes for questions. Caesar, do you have questions from the chat I can answer, or should we let people unmute?
I was going to let Roman go ahead and unmute and ask the latter question, or excuse me, you have two questions in there, Roman. Go ahead.
Thanks, Cesar. Well, let me ask the last one first. Do you imagine a time that districts across the state would actually adopt either the Mastery Transcript Consortium that MTC has created or similar? Is that
that's the
conversation?
That's a good question, Roman, and that's the direction we're moving. Right now, we have 5 LEAs that have identified like maybe a specific school, or in some cases, if they're rural LEAs. Just to give you a little understanding, there might be an LEA in Utah that literally just has one high school, like the whole county has one high school. And so they might say, we're going to go to a Mastery Transcript Consortium style portfolio. Nobody has completely adopted that yet. Everyone's kind of hybriding it. They're saying like, we'll do the MTC, like, I forgot the name of it already, but like the learner profile or portfolio, but we'll also have the grades. But we have had USHE, which is the Utah State Higher Education Organization, which represents all of our colleges and universities. They're working with us too. And they have all agreed through legislation to accept a mastery transcript from students in Utah schools. So we are definitely making progress there. It is in its, I wouldn't say it's infancy, but it's still kind of moving along. This is a big challenge for parents to adopt, because as soon as they hear this, then they think, well, wait, how's my child going to be evaluated in order to get that scholarship from Stanford or that scholarship from the University of Utah if they want to go to a good school? Or how are they going to get that sports scholarship and things like that? Because NCAA is still adjusting their what they'll accept.
We in California will be excited to watch and learn from your experience.
Yeah.
As you noted earlier, I mean, we're you're a tenth the size that we are in terms of student population, and
right.
Probably.
Roman, I hope you didn't go to Stanford. I didn't mean to.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's great that you're being so progressive.
We're trying to. We also created a flexibility guide, an education flexibility guide, and I can actually bring that up and share that in the link as well. Let me just change windows here real quick. That's been really important because we have high school administrators saying like, hey, I've got this student who just transferred here and wants to skip 2 math courses. How do we do that? And our flexibility guide provides direction on how to get what they need either from us, the board, or where to go in Utah. So here's our flex guide in the chat for you.
Is all that possible through state education code, or do some need to get waivers through innovation zone legislation or something similar?
Exactly. That's what the flex guide helps with, is getting the waivers that they need. And we do have a pretty progressive state legislature passing laws that support innovation in public education. Yep, so you guys got that? Cool. I think there was another question.
Elena, did you want to elaborate on what you plugged in there regarding the learning record?
Yeah, sure thing. I apologize that I'm on my phone at the moment, but so the pilot that Michael is referencing with a few of the schools, they're using the MTC learning record. So it's similar to the transcript, although the transcript was developed for college admission officers, and this is a bit more flexible. But it's still a capture of competencies. You can still put in, your competency model as well as any experiences that a student has had. But it can be sent alongside a traditional transcript with grades. So it's more of an on-ramp to the transcript, and it can be sent to external audiences. So hopefully that helps a bit.
That helps a lot. Thank you for triggering my memory. Yes, learning record. I was thinking exposition of learning and I just completely forgot the word.
Yeah, you're correct. So the current tool is called the Exhibition of Learner Mastery, but that can't be sent externally. So we are actually in the development phase for the learning record, which will be ready in the next couple of months.
Excellent. A question for you, Michael, as you rolled out your state level portrait of a graduate and as you started to diffuse that through the LEAs, I know Contessa earlier reflected on, they crafted it centrally, they pushed it out, and then there was maybe rethink and let's get some more buy-in. From a state level diffusion, any lessons learned or any advice as folks are working on their own portrait of a graduate and then looking to integrated into the way business is done on a school district or at the county level or bigger?
Yeah, we're currently in the process of working on with KnowledgeWorks, who's been doing some workshops for LEAs that are interested in not just adopting the Utah State Portrait of a Graduate, but crafting their own. And we have like 36 of our LEAs, which is about a third. And in those 36, our big six, our largest, Salt Lake City, and the suburban areas around Salt Lake City, as well as the Provo area and Utah Valley, have all gotten on board with creating their own portraits of a graduate. And their logical next step is, wait, we have to change the way we're teaching and assessing students. And then they jump right into PCBL. It's just like the perfect segue.
Nice.
The lesson learned is, I would say, if you want to grow strong, go slow. And if you want to make sure something doesn't work, make it a state mandate. Right? Like, it sounds like a
Love
joke,
it.
but it's true. And then
Yeah.
the big question we've heard from our school districts is like, wait a minute, if we're going to change the way we teach and change the way we assess learning, you need to change the way you assess us. And that's what's happening right now is our state's assessment and accountability department is realigning, redesigning, and they're getting a lot of public comment and figuring out how do we do this so that we're not judging our school's progress on moving away from the average by then averaging them, right? How do we do that at the state level? So there's lots of changes coming in that direction. And we just have to kind of reassure our LEAs as they create their own portraits of a graduate. It's like, we are going to support you on this. Our Board of Education just last week doubled down, is what I like to say. There's been some political pushback against Portrait of a Graduate, and there was a motion to revoke it. It didn't even get a second, but then a motion was made to have a resolution about it, and that passed. And it was, this is what we're doing, this is what's best for students, and this is how we're moving forward. So yeah, that's the lesson, is go slow and support your LEAs and change the way you assess.
And I'm just curious, the balking at the Portrait of a Graduate was, what were the underpinnings on that?
Some of the, I hate to like give it any more fuel to the fire, but some of the discussion was that like Portrait of a Graduate is a nationwide leftist Marxist movement that's trying to indoctrinate children. I don't know how to summarize it any better than that, that there's a fear that big tech money is spearheading this. And I'm like, I wish it was, I'd have a much better car. Right.
Well, it looks like Roman's trying to recruit you to come out west, and
oh yeah,
well,
come out there and infiltrate. Hey, actually, Roman, I think it's Californians that are infiltrating Utah.
I know, it's going the wrong way.
Yeah.
well, I think we are set, and thank you so much, Michael, and Brittany has really shared a lot of great things about the team at the state level, going into the site level, and the work that you're doing. So keep up the great work out there.
Oh no, and thank you guys. Thank you, Learner Centered, for your support. And thank you everybody who joined to let us share our story. It was great talking with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.